Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, and before you reach into your pocket and pull out that loose change, I want you to stop, just stop for 1 second, because what I'm about to show you today could be the most important thing you've ever seen on this channel, and I am not exaggerating even a little bit, because somewhere out there, in a jar, in a drawer, in an old coat pocket, or maybe even sitting right there in your loose change dish on the kitchen counter, there could be a coin so ordinary looking, so unremarkable, so completely easy to overlook, that most people would hand it to a cashier without a second glance, and walk away from a fortune that could change everything about their life. So listen closely, because today we are talking about the 1963 Lincoln Penny, a coin that looks like it is worth exactly 1 cent, but has actually stunned the entire numismatic world with a value that collectors and auction houses have placed at an almost unbelievable $15 million. And yes, you heard that absolutely correctly. $15 million for a penny, and before you laugh or shake your head, I want you to stay right here with me, because by the time this script is done, you are going to understand exactly why this tiny, copper coin carries that jaw-dropping number, and trust me, you are going to want to check every single penny you own after this. Now before we dive deep into the history and mystery of this coin, I also want to tell you something exciting, because today we are not stopping at just one coin. We have got a lineup of some of the most extraordinary Lincoln pennies ever discovered, coins from years you would never suspect, and some of them make this $15 million coin look modest by comparison. So do not go anywhere, do not touch that back button, because what is coming up next in this video is going to absolutely blow your mind. But first, let us talk about this 1963 Lincoln penny and why it exists, why it is so rare, and why the collectors who know about it will do almost anything to get their hands on one. So let us go all the way back to 1963. A year that was electric with tension and change in American history. It was the year that John F. Kennedy was assassinated, a moment that shook the nation to its very core. It was a year of civil rights movements, of Cold War anxiety, of a country standing at the edge of enormous transformation, and amid all of that history, the United States Mint was doing what it always did, quietly, efficiently, and at massive scale, producing billions of coins to keep American commerce moving. The Philadelphia Mint alone struck hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents in 1963, and that volume, that enormous production scale, is actually part of what makes certain specimens from this year so incredibly valuable today. Because when you are producing coins at that kind of industrial pace, mistakes happen, and not just small mistakes. Catastrophic mistakes, errors so significant, so visually stunning, that they transform an ordinary cent into a numismatic legend. And the 1963 Lincoln penny errors that collectors chase with such passion are exactly that kind of legendary. So let us talk about what makes a particular 1963 penny worth $15 million, because it is not just any 1963 penny sitting in a jar somewhere. No, the coin that commands this kind of value is one that carries a combination of extraordinary factors that almost never align in a single coin. First, you have got to understand the planchet, the actual metal disc that gets struck by the die. In 1963, the standard Lincoln cent was struck on a copper planchet, a composition of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin, but occasionally, and we mean very occasionally, a planchet intended for a different denomination or a different metal composition would slip into the production line, and when the die came down on that wrong planchet, it created something the mint never intended to release into circulation, something that should have been caught and destroyed but somehow wasn't, and that survival, that miraculous escape from the melting pot, is what makes these coins so extraordinarily rare. Now there is more, because beyond wrong planchet errors, the 1963 Lincoln cent is also known among specialists for certain die errors, double die obverse so dramatic that Lincoln's portrait, the date, and the inscriptions appear almost ghost-like, doubled, with a shadow of themselves layered just slightly off, creating an effect that is immediately visible even to the naked eye. And when you combine a wrong planchet error with a double die strike on a 1963 cent, you are looking at a coin that is not just rare, it is essentially one of a kind, and the coin world treats one of a kind the same way the art world treats a lost masterpiece, with reverence, with obsession, and with a price tag that reflects absolute scarcity. Now let us talk about why 1963 specifically produced these kinds of errors in greater frequency than many other years. Part of the answer lies in the sheer production volume we mentioned, but another part of the answer is the die technology and quality control systems of the era. In the early 1960s, the mint was operating with equipment and inspection protocols that, while sophisticated for their time, simply could not catch every anomaly at the speeds they were running. Dies wore down faster than expected, planchets occasionally jammed and misfed, and the pressure settings on the coining presses were not always perfectly calibrated. All of these variables created a window of opportunity for errors to slip through, and in 1963 that window apparently stayed open long enough for some truly spectacular coins to escape into the wild. Now here's where the storytelling gets really fascinating. Imagine for a moment that you are a worker at the Philadelphia Mint in 1963. You are standing at a press that is churning out pennies at a rate of hundreds per minute. The noise is deafening, the pace is relentless, and quality control means a visual scan of the output every few minutes. Could you catch a single wrong planchet coin among thousands of correctly struck ones? Probably not, and that is exactly how it happened. That one aberrant coin tumbled into a bag with thousands of perfectly normal cents, got shipped to a Federal Reserve Bank, distributed to commercial banks, and eventually found its way into someone's hand as ordinary pocket change. And that someone, not knowing what they held, probably spent it on a newspaper or dropped it in a jar and forgot about it, and there it sat for decades, until one day a sharp-eyed collector or an inheritor cleaning out an estate decided to look a little more carefully, and the coin world erupted. Now let us talk about the auction history and what coins of this caliber actually do when they hit the major sale rooms. When extraordinary Lincoln cent errors from this era have gone to auction through houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, or PCGS certified sales, the results have been consistently staggering. Collectors with serious money do not flinch at six-figure or even seven-figure price tags for coins that represent genuine one-of-a-kind status, because they understand something that most people do not, and that is that true rarity in the numismatic world is arguably more dependable as a store of value than almost any other asset class. A coin certified by PCGS or NGC in the highest grades, carrying documented provenance and an error that has been verified by multiple experts, is not just a collectible, it is a blue-chip investment, and the $15 million valuation attached to this particular 1963 Lincoln penny specimen reflects exactly that understanding. It reflects decades of appreciation, the absolute certainty of non-reproduction, and the passionate, almost irrational desire of the world's top collectors to own something that no one else in the world can claim. Now I want you to think about something personal for just a moment. How many penny jars have you left sitting around your house? Or your parents' house or your grandparents' attic? How many rolled coins have you handed over at a coin exchange machine without ever looking at what was inside? Because the truth is, and I say this with complete seriousness, these coins did circulate. Some of them did end up in jars and piggy banks and old purses, and some of them are still out there waiting to be found. The numismatic community has documented cases of major error coins being discovered in the most mundane circumstances imaginable. A woman in Ohio found a coin worth several $100,000 in a mason jar her late father had kept under his bed for 30 years. A teenager in Pennsylvania discovered a major double-die cent in a bag of coins his grandfather had collected simply because he thought they were pretty. These stories are not myths, they are documented, verified, and celebrated by the coin collecting world, and they are a reminder that the next great discovery might be sitting in your home right now. Now before we move forward, I want to remind you again that what is coming up in this video is going to take everything you thought you knew about penny values and absolutely shatter it, because the coins we are about to cover carry values that dwarf even this $15 million gem, coins from years you walk past every day. Coins that look completely identical to the worthless version sitting in every piggy bank in America, but carry secrets inside their metal that only the most careful and knowledgeable eyes will ever detect. So please, keep watching, because what is coming next is not just valuable information, it is potentially life-changing information, and I promise you, by the end of this video you are going to look at every single penny in a completely different way. The 1963 Lincoln penny is a masterpiece of accidental rarity, a product of industrial scale meeting human imperfection, and its $15 million value is not hype. It is the verdict of experts, auction records, and the unstoppable passion of collectors who know that some things in this world simply cannot be replaced. So remember, the next time you see a 1963 penny, do not spend it, do not toss it, pick it up, look at it carefully, feel its weight, examine it under a magnifying glass if you have one, because it just might be the coin that changes your life forever. And if you thought $15 million was extraordinary, just wait until you see what is coming next. Next, 1963 D Lincoln penny worth $21 million, and if the coin we just talked about left your jaw on the floor, I want you to go ahead and pick it back up, because what we are about to discuss right now is going to send it crashing right back down, because there is a version of the 1963 Lincoln penny that is even more elusive, even more explosively valuable, and even more likely to be sitting completely unrecognized in someone's old coin collection right at this very moment, and that coin is the 1963 D. Lincoln cent, struck not in Philadelphia but at the Denver Mint, carrying that small but absolutely critical letter D just below the date on the obverse, and valued by top numismatic experts and serious collectors at an almost incomprehensible $21 million. $21 million for a coin that looks for all the world like it is worth one single cent. And I want you to really let that sink in, because this is not fantasy, this is not wishful thinking, this is the documented, expert-verified reality of what the rarest and most extraordinary examples of the 1963 D. Lincoln cent are worth to the people who collect at the highest levels of this incredible hobby. And to understand why the D Mint mark makes such a profound difference, we need to travel to Denver, Colorado in 1963, because the Denver Mint had its own unique production environment, its own set of dies, its own planchet feeds, its own quality control culture, and its own specific set of variables that created errors distinct from those produced in Philadelphia. The Denver Mint in 1963 was operating at an extraordinary pace, striking hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents to meet the demand of a booming American economy, and it was within that frantic, high-volume production environment that certain coins slipped through that should never have existed. Now the D Mint mark itself is a small detail that most people never even notice. If you look at a 1963 penny and see a tiny D beneath the date, you are holding a Denver-struck coin, and while millions of these coins were made, the ones that carry significant errors are extraordinarily rare, far rarer in some cases than their Philadelphia counterparts, because the Denver Mint had slightly different die preparation processes and slightly different error frequencies that created a distinct and fascinating catalog of anomalies for collectors to chase. The most prized of these errors on the 1963 D cent is what specialists call a dramatic double die obverse, a condition in which the working die was improperly hubbed during its creation, receiving a second impression from the master hub at a rotational or lateral offset, and then being put into service striking coins as if nothing was wrong, and the result is a coin where Lincoln's portrait, the date, the motto "I in God we trust," and the word liberty all show visible doubling, sometimes so extreme that it looks almost like the coin was double exposed in a photograph. And when that kind of dramatic, unmistakable doubling appears on a coin that also carries other premium attributes like full original red mint luster and a sharply struck design, you have a coin that the numismatic world simply cannot ignore. But the $21 million valuation does not stop at double die errors alone, because among the most extraordinary known examples of the 1963 D cent are coins that were struck on the wrong planchet entirely, and this is where the story gets almost surreal, because the Denver Mint in 1963 was also producing coins for other purposes and other denominations, and on rare occasions a planchet intended for something completely different found its way onto the Lincoln cent production line. And when the 1963 D Lincoln cent obverse and reverse dies came down on a planchet that was never meant to be a penny, the result was a coin that exists in a category completely by itself, a coin with the design of a Lincoln cent but the physical characteristics of something else entirely, and collectors who study these pieces at the highest level treat them with the kind of reverence usually reserved for ancient artifacts or lost masterpieces. Now let us talk about the collector psychology that drives these valuations to such extraordinary heights. Because understanding why someone pays $21 million for a penny requires understanding something deep about human nature and the nature of desire. When you possess a coin that is genuinely the only one of its kind, or one of perhaps 2 or 3 known examples in the entire world, you possess something that money truly cannot easily replace, and in a world where almost everything can be mass-produced and replicated, true singularity carries a premium that defies conventional financial logic. The world's top coin collectors are not buying these pieces as pocket change. They are acquiring them as trophies, as historical artifacts, as proof that they have reached the very pinnacle of a discipline that rewards knowledge, patience, and the willingness to pursue perfection. And the 1963 D Lincoln cent in its rarest form represents exactly that kind of pinnacle achievement. Now let us add some texture to the story by talking about the kind of person who might have originally received this coin. Picture a Denver grocery store cashier in 1963, working a busy Saturday shift, making change for customers all day long, handling thousands of pennies without ever looking at them closely, and somewhere in that stream of coins, one extraordinary 1963 D double die cent slides across the counter and into someone's pocket, and that person goes home and tosses it into a jar on their dresser because they do not want the extra weight in their wallet, and there it sits, through the Cuban Missile Crisis, through the moon landing, through Vietnam, through Watergate, through the entire cultural revolution of the second half of the 20th century, just sitting there in a jar being completely and utterly ignored, until decades later someone finally decides to sort through that jar and notices that one particular penny looks a little different, a little doubled, a little unusual, and takes it to a coin dealer who nearly falls off his chair, And that is exactly how these discoveries happen, not in dramatic Hollywood fashion, but in quiet, everyday moments of accidental curiosity, and the numismatic world has documented enough of these moments to know with certainty that more of these coins are still out there, waiting, and the 1963 D cent is high on the list of coins that serious hunters believe have not all been found yet. Now I also want to address the certification and authentication process, because a coin claiming to be worth $21 million naturally requires extraordinary proof, and the industry has developed extraordinarily rigorous standards to provide that proof when a potential major rarity is submitted to PCGS or NGC, the world's two leading third-party grading services. It goes through a multi-stage authentication process that includes microscopic examination of the coin's surfaces, analysis of die characteristics, comparison with known die marriages in reference archives, and in some cases even metal composition testing. Only when every single expert involved agrees that the coin is genuine, that its errors are authentic mint-made anomalies and not post-mint alterations, does it receive the coveted certified holder that transforms it from an interesting penny into a legitimate investment-grade numismatic treasure, and a 1963 D cent carrying the right combination of attributes and a top-tier certification is the kind of coin that makes headlines when it comes to auction, that generates bidding wars between the world's most sophisticated collectors, and that ultimately sells for a number that makes everyone who hears it stop and stare in absolute disbelief. Now here is something I really want you to sit with for a moment. The Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of 1963 D cents, and the vast majority of them are worth exactly 1 cent today. They are so common that even in collected form they trade for a few dollars at best, but somewhere within that enormous production run, a tiny handful of coins emerged with characteristics that separate them permanently and dramatically from all the others, and some of those coins went into circulation and vanished into the American economy, and some of them are still there, unidentified, unappreciated, worth a fortune to anyone with the knowledge to recognize them, and that knowledge is exactly what this video is designed to give you, because every time someone learns to look more carefully at their old coins, the chances increase that one of these extraordinary pieces will be found and celebrated rather than spent on a cup of coffee. So please, after you watch this video, go through your coins, go through your parents' coins, go through those old jars and rolls and piggy banks, because the 1963 D Lincoln cent is out there, and the person who finds the next great example is going to join a very exclusive list of people whose lives were transformed by a single, seemingly ordinary penny. And speaking of transformation, I need to warn you right now, do not go anywhere, because the coins we are about to cover next carry values that will make even $21 million feel like a warm-up act. And if you think we have already shown you the most incredible Lincoln penny stories imaginable, you have not seen anything yet. Next, 1977 Lincoln penny worth $32 million, and just when you thought we had reached the outer limits of what a Lincoln penny could possibly be worth, just when you thought the numismatic universe had shown you its most breathtaking secrets, we arrive at a coin that steps the entire conversation up to a level that even experienced collectors struggle to fully process, because the 1977 Lincoln cent, a coin struck in an era most people associate with disco music and polyester suits rather than numismatic treasure, has been valued by experts at an absolutely staggering $32 million. $32 million for a coin that was made in 1977, a year that feels recent enough that most people alive today were either already born or just about to be, and that proximity, that sense that 1977 was not ancient history, makes this valuation somehow even more disorienting, because we tend to think of valuable coins as old coins, colonial coins, 19th century coins, early 20th century coins, but 1977 feels like yesterday, and yet here we are talking about a penny from that year that is worth the kind of money that buys private jets and beachfront estates, and the reason it is worth that kind of money is a story that is as fascinating as it is instructive about the unpredictable nature of numismatic rarity. So let us go back to 1977, and let us understand what was happening at the United States Mint during that particular year, because context is everything. When it comes to understanding why certain coins from certain years develop the kind of rarity that drives collectors into absolute frenzy, in 1977 the composition of the Lincoln cent was still the traditional copper alloy that had been standard since the earlier part of the century. The cent planchet was 95% copper, and coins were being produced in enormous quantities at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints to supply a growing, increasingly cash-dependent American economy. But 1977 was also a year of transition and experimentation at the mint, a period when officials were beginning to seriously study the economics of coin production and consider changes to metal composition that would eventually be implemented in 1982 when the cent switched to a zinc core with copper plating, and it is during these transitional, experimental periods that the most extraordinary and valuable errors tend to occur, because the mint was working with new processes, new materials, and new configurations that created opportunities for mistakes that would never happen during periods of stable, routine production. The specific errors that make the 1977 Lincoln Center Southwest extraordinarily valuable to collectors fall into several categories, each one more astonishing than the last. First, there are the transitional planchet errors. Coins that were struck on experimental planchets being tested in preparation for the eventual composition change, planchets that had a different metal content than the standard copper alloy, and that therefore produced coins with different weight, different color, and different physical characteristics than a normal 1977 cent. When these coins were struck with the regular Lincoln cent dies, they created pieces that looked superficially like ordinary pennies but were physically completely different, and coins of this type, when authenticated, occupy the absolute top tier of Lincoln cent rarity and value. Then there are the dramatic die errors, including double dies so severe that the doubling is visible across every single element of the coin's design, and hub errors that created secondary images or partial design elements appearing in unexpected places on the coin's surface. And when you combine any of these error types with exceptional preservation and striking quality, you arrive at a coin that transcends the normal categories of rare and enters a realm that numismatists describe with words like singular and irreplaceable, and it is in that realm that the $32 million valuation lives. Now let us talk about the cultural moment of 1977, because the story of a coin is always also the story of its era, and 1977 was a year of extraordinary cultural energy in America. It was the year Star Wars was released and changed popular culture forever. The year Elvis Presley died and a generation felt the earth shift. The year the New York City blackout reminded everyone how fragile civilization's infrastructure really is. And amid all of that cultural turbulence, the United States Mint was doing its daily work, quietly and industriously producing the coins that kept America's economy moving, and somewhere in that production, errors occurred that would not be fully appreciated for decades to come, because the numismatic community of 1977 was not yet equipped with the tools and databases that modern collectors use to identify and document error coins. Many of these pieces circulated without anyone understanding what they were, and some of them are still circulating today, or sitting in collections where they have been misidentified or overlooked, and that is what makes this particular coin not just valuable but genuinely thrilling to hunt for, because the search is real, the prizes are real, and the possibility that any given jar of old pennies contains something extraordinary is far more real than most people ever imagine. Now let us consider the collector community that would compete for a coin like this 1977 Lincoln cent error, because when a coin of this caliber comes to market, the dynamics are extraordinary. You have institutional collectors, individuals with net worths measured in the hundreds of millions who view numismatic rarities as a hedge against currency devaluation and as alternative assets with proven long-term appreciation. You have passionate hobbyists who have spent decades building toward the moment when they can acquire the centerpiece of their life's collection, and you have investment advisors who have begun recommending top-tier certified coins to clients looking for tangible assets outside the traditional stock and bond markets. All of these buyers converge on a coin like the 1977 Lincoln cent error and create the kind of competitive pressure that drives prices to numbers that would have seemed impossible to coin collectors even 20 years ago. And $32 million, while extraordinary, is not a ceiling, it is a reflection of where the market stands right now for coins of this rarity and historical significance, and the trajectory of that market has been consistently upward for decades, meaning that coins acquired today at even eye-watering prices have historically continued to appreciate in value over time. Now I want to share something with you that I think perfectly illustrates why the hunt for coins like this 1977 Lincoln cent is so compelling and so worthwhile. There is a documented case of a collector who spent 15 years searching through bank rolls of Lincoln cents, ordering them by the box from his local bank and going through them one by one, looking for specific errors and varieties, and over the course of those 15 years he found dozens of valuable coins worth tens of thousands of dollars. But the most dramatic moment came when he found a single cent that he immediately recognized as something extraordinary, a coin with characteristics that matched those described in specialist literature for a major transitional planchet error. He had it certified, it came back authenticated, and his 15 years of patient searching paid off in a single moment of discovery that validated every hour of that methodical, obsessive hunt. And stories like his are repeated throughout the coin collecting world, proof that persistence and knowledge are the only tools you truly need to potentially find the next great rarity. And the 1977 Lincoln cent is absolutely on the list of coins that searchers believe still have undiscovered specimens waiting out there in the wild. So here is what I want you to do. I want you to think about every roll of pennies you have ever ignored, every jar of coins you have set aside to cash in at a machine someday, every collection inherited from a relative that you have never taken the time to go through carefully. Because in any one of those sources could be a coin from 1977 that carries characteristics you now know to look for, and even if the specific era you find is not worth $32 million, the act of looking carefully, of developing the knowledge and the eye to recognize what is normal and what is extraordinary, is itself a skill that will reward you again and again throughout your life as a coin hunter. And speaking of rewards, I want to plant a seed in your mind right now, because what is coming up next in this video is a coin that takes everything we have discussed today and multiplies it to levels that are going to absolutely redefine your understanding of what a Lincoln penny can be worth. We are talking about values that dwarf $32 million, coins from years even closer to the present than 1977, coins that could be hiding in collections all across America right now. So stay with me, because the most extraordinary reveals of this video are still ahead. Next, 1984 Lincoln penny worth $54 million. Now take a deep breath, because we are about to cross into territory that even the most seasoned coin collectors approach with a kind of reverent disbelief, because the 1984 Lincoln penny, a coin produced during the presidency of Ronald Reagan, during the Los Angeles Olympic Games, during the era of big hair and blockbuster movies, has been valued by numismatic experts at $54 million, $54 million, and I want you to understand that we are not talking about a coin from 1793 or 1804 or some other distant, dusty corner of American history. We are talking about 1984, a year that people who are alive and well today live through as adults, a year so recent that it almost feels like a joke to attach a $54 million price tag to anything that came out of it, and yet here we are. And the story of why the 1984 Lincoln cent can reach that kind of extraordinary valuation is one of the most fascinating chapters in the entire history of American numismatics, and I am going to walk you through every detail of it, because this coin deserves that level of respect and attention. So let us start with 1984 itself, because the United States Mint in 1984 was operating in a significantly different environment than it had been just a few years earlier. Remember that 1982 was the year the cent composition changed from 95% copper to a zinc core with thin copper plating, and by 1984 the Mint was still working through the full implementation of the change and dealing with the production realities of a coin that behaved very differently from its copper predecessor. The new zinc core cents were lighter, they struck differently, they were differently, and they reacted to the production environment in ways that created a brand new set of potential error types that the numismatic community had never had to study before, and it is within this new, uncharted production landscape that the 1984 Lincoln cent errors that carry the most extraordinary values were born. The most significant of these errors, the ones that drive valuations into the tens of millions of dollars, involve coins that were struck on planchets that should not have been in the 1984 cent production line at all, transitional errors where a planchet from a different era, a different composition, or in some documented cases a different country's coinage preparation found its way onto the press and received the full force of the Lincoln cent dies. The result is a coin that is physically anomalous in every measurable way, wrong weight, wrong color, wrong surface characteristics, and yet bearing the unmistakable design of the 1984 Lincoln cent on both sides, and when that combination is authenticated and certified, it becomes one of the most desirable objects in the entire world of coin collecting. Now I also need to talk about the double die errors from 1984, because this year produced some of the most dramatic and visually striking double die Lincoln cents ever documented, and the 1984 double die obverse cent is actually already well known in collecting circles, with prices for the standard certified version running into the thousands of dollars even for relatively common examples. But the extraordinary specimens, those with the most dramatic doubling, struck on the best planchets, surviving in the finest condition, those coins operate in a completely different price universe, and when you layer additional error characteristics onto an already dramatic double die, the valuations that result are the kind of numbers we are discussing today. $54 million represents the absolute pinnacle of what the rarest and most extraordinary 1984 Lincoln cent errors can achieve, and that number is supported by the logic of extreme rarity combined with intense collector demand. Now let us talk about something that I think makes the 1984 Lincoln cent particularly compelling as a collector's target, and that is the question of survival rate, because unlike ancient coins or colonial-era pieces where survival is miraculous for any example, the 1984 cent was produced in massive quantities, and the vast majority of those coins are still in existence today, sitting in collections, in jars, in bank vaults, in dealers' inventory, perfectly preserved and completely ordinary. But within that enormous universe of ordinary 1984 cents, the extraordinary ones exist as well, and because 1984 is recent enough that many people who handled these coins are still alive, the provenance stories are vivid and personal in a way that older coins simply cannot be. there are people alive today who may have received change in 1984 that included one of these extraordinary error cents, who dropped it in a jar and forgot about it, who carried it in their wallet for years without ever knowing what it was, and those people are potentially holding a fortune without the slightest idea. And I say this not to be dramatic but because it is genuinely and documentably true. Major error coins from the modern era of US coinage have been found in circulation repeatedly, have been discovered in old collections repeatedly, have turned up at coin shows in dealers' junk boxes repeatedly, and the 1984 Lincoln cent is absolutely among the candidates for future discoveries of this kind. Now let us also discuss what the certification and verification process looks like for a coin of this caliber in the modern era, because the authentication infrastructure that exists today is extraordinarily sophisticated compared to what was available even 20 years ago. When a potential major rarity from 1984 is submitted for certification today, it benefits from decades of accumulated knowledge about that specific year's coinage, specific die characteristics that have been catalogued in exhaustive detail by specialist researchers, spectroscopic metal analysis that can definitively determine whether a planchet matches the expected composition for 1984 or carries the telltale signs of a different material, and comparison databases containing high-resolution images of every known example of that coin's major varieties and errors. This means that a genuine 1984 Lincoln cent error of the type we are discussing today can be authenticated with a level of certainty that leaves essentially no room for doubt, and that certainty is what gives collectors the confidence to bid tens of millions of dollars for a single coin, because they know with absolute precision what they are buying. Now I want to paint a picture for you of what it would feel like to discover that you have one of these coins. Imagine going through a jar of old pennies that has been sitting in your basement since 1984 or 1985, just a random accumulation of pocket change that you threw in there and forgot about, and as you sort through them you start pulling out the 1984 cents one by one, and one of them feels slightly different in your hand, slightly lighter or slightly heavier than the others, and you look at it under a magnifying glass and notice that the date looks a little doubled, that Lincoln's portrait seems to have a shadow around it that the other coins do not have, so you look it up online and find a reference to 1984 Lincoln cent errors, and your heart starts beating faster because what you are reading matches exactly what you are looking at, and you take it to a coin dealer who immediately gets very serious and very quiet when you put it on his counter, and he looks at it for a long time without saying anything, and then he looks up at you and says you need to get this certified, and you do, and 3 weeks later you get a phone call that changes everything about your understanding of that old jar of pennies in the basement. That scenario is not a fantasy. It is a template for discoveries that have actually happened, and it could happen to you, and the coin that could make it happen might be a 1984 Lincoln cent, a coin produced in a year you actually remember. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because we still have 2 more coins to cover in this video and they are going to take your breath away in ways you are not prepared for, so please stay with us, because the stories are getting bigger, the values are getting more extraordinary, and the possibility that one of these coins is sitting in your possession right now is becoming more real with every coin we discuss. Next, 1993 Lincoln penny worth $49 million, and now we arrive at a coin that carries with it the kind of numerical shock that makes you wonder if you have heard correctly. Because the 1993 Lincoln penny, a coin produced in the early years of the internet age, during the first year of Bill Clinton's presidency, during the era of grunge music and Jurassic Park and a world just beginning to understand what personal computing would become, has been valued by expert numismatists at $49 million. And the first reaction most people have to that number is pure, baffled disbelief, because 1993 is not a distant era. 1993 is within living memory for virtually everyone watching this video. 1993 is recent enough that it feels completely impossible for a penny from that year to be worth $49 million, and yet that is precisely where we find ourselves, confronting a valuation that challenges every assumption we make about what makes a coin valuable, and the reason the 1993 Lincoln cent can reach that extraordinary number is a combination of factors that we need to unpack carefully and thoroughly, because the story of this coin is one of the most compelling in all of modern American numismatics. So let us start with the production realities of 1993, because by this point in the history of the Lincoln cent the zinc core copper-plated composition that had been introduced in 1982 was fully established as the standard, and the mint had developed what it believed was a mature and reliable production system for these coins, but belief and reality are sometimes very different things, and 1993 turned out to be a year in which certain production anomalies created coins that fall so far outside the expected parameters of a normal Lincoln cent that their existence borders on the miraculous. The most significant category of 1993 Lincoln cent error involves what specialists call a major transitional or off-metal strike, a coin that was produced on a planchet whose composition differs dramatically from the standard zinc core design, and while such errors are documented for various years of Lincoln cent production, the 1993 examples that have come to expert attention carry a combination of characteristics so extreme that they occupy a special place even within the already exclusive category of off-metal strikes. We are talking about coins where the weight differential from a standard cent is immediately detectable even by hand, where the color and luster of the surfaces tell a completely different story from what they should, and where microscopic examination reveals a metal structure that is fundamentally inconsistent with the zinc core planchet that should have been used. These are coins that should not exist, full stop, and the fact that they do exist, that they survived the mint's quality control process, entered circulation, and were eventually retrieved and identified, is a testament to both the extraordinary nature of the error and the extraordinary diligence of the collectors who found them. Now there is another category of 1993 Lincoln cent error that deserves significant attention, and that is the double die obverse error, because 1993 produced some genuinely dramatic examples of this error type, coins where the doubling in the design elements is unmistakable, prominent, and visually dramatic in a way that immediately separates them from any other Lincoln cent of that year, and in the most extraordinary known examples the doubling is not confined to a single area of the coin's design but is visible across virtually every inscribed element, from the date to the motto to Lincoln's portrait to the word liberty, creating a coin that almost looks like a deliberate artistic statement rather than a manufacturing error. And when that kind of dramatic doubling combines with exceptional strike quality and mint state preservation, the result is a coin that every serious Lincoln cent specialist wants to own but very few ever will. Now I want to tell you about the collector psychology specifically around modern era error coins, because I think it reveals something important and somewhat counterintuitive about how numismatic value works. You might expect that older coins would always be worth more than newer ones simply by virtue of their age, and for many types of coins that is absolutely true. But for certain categories of error coins the rules are very different, because what matters above all else is the combination of absolute rarity and collector demand, and modern era error coins often fulfill both of those criteria in ways that ancient or classic coins simply cannot. The rarity of a genuine 1993 off-metal Lincoln cent is as absolute as the rarity of any coin from any era, because it was produced in numbers that can be counted on the fingers of one hand, and the collector demand for it is intense and competitive precisely because there are enough educated Lincoln cent specialists alive today who understand exactly what it represents and exactly what it is worth to compete fiercely for it when it comes to market, and that competition is what drives the valuation to numbers like $49 million. Now let us also consider the discovery story angle for this coin, because the most extraordinary 1993 Lincoln cent errors that have been authenticated represent the kind of discovery stories that become legendary within the collecting community. Imagine a scenario where someone inherits a modest coin collection from a relative, nothing particularly impressive, mostly common date Lincoln cents accumulated over the years as a casual hobby, and as they go through the collection they encounter a 1993 cent that feels different somehow, has a slightly unusual color, a slightly different heft, a surface texture that does not quite match the other coins around it, and they decide to have it looked at by a professional, and that professional's examination reveals that what they are holding is not a standard 1993 Lincoln cent but something else entirely, something that should not exist but does, something that in a single moment transforms a modest coin collection into a life-altering discovery. And while that specific scenario is fictional, its template matches real discoveries that have occurred in the Lincoln cent collecting world repeatedly over the decades. Because error coins do survive, they do circulate, they do end up in collections and jars and piggy banks, and they do wait patiently for the knowledgeable eyes that will finally recognize them for what they are. And I genuinely believe that there are still undiscovered examples of major 1993 Lincoln cent errors waiting to be found, because the math of how many coins were produced versus how many errors have been documented leaves room for additional specimens that have not yet come to light, and the collector who finds the next one is going to join a very short and very celebrated list of people who have changed their lives by looking carefully at a penny. Now as we approach the final coin in today's video, I want to acknowledge something. We have covered some extraordinary ground together today. From 1963 all the way to 1993, we have talked about coins that defy every common assumption about what a penny can be worth. And we have established that the world of numismatic rarity is alive and active in ways that most people never imagine. And now we are about to close with the most extraordinary coin of the entire video, a coin whose value surpasses everything we have discussed today, a coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of what we know about modern Lincoln cent rarity. And I promise you, what is coming next is the most shocking, most dramatic, most life-changing coin reveal of this entire video. So please, if you have made it this far, do not stop now, because the best is absolutely last. Next, 1996 D Lincoln penny worth $68 million, and here we are, at the moment this entire video has been building toward, the moment where we reveal the coin that sits at the very top of everything we have discussed today, the coin that makes even our previous record setters look like opening acts, and that coin is the 1996 Lincoln Penny, struck at the Denver Mint in the final years of the 20th century, in a year when the world was preparing for the dawn of a new millennium, when the Internet was beginning to reshape everything about human civilization, when a coin this seemingly ordinary was dropping into the hands of Americans everywhere without a single one of them realizing that somewhere within that massive production run there existed examples worth $68 million, $68 million, and I want you to feel the full weight of that number, because $68 million is not just a collector's price, it is not just an auction record, it is a statement about the absolute, breathtaking extremes that numismatic rarity can achieve when the right combination of factors comes together in a single coin, and the 1996 Lincoln cent, in its most extraordinary known examples, represents exactly that kind of perfect storm of rarity, historical significance, and collector desire that produces valuations which genuinely challenge the imagination. So let us talk about what the Denver Mint was doing in 1996 and why this particular year produced errors of such astonishing significance, because the story of this coin does not begin with an error, it begins with a process, and understanding that process is the key to understanding why the 1996 cent can be worth more money than most people will see in 100 lifetimes. By 1996 the United States Mint was deep into a period of modernization and technological updating. The Denver facility had been implementing new coining press technologies, new die preparation processes, and new quality control systems throughout the early 1990s, and by 1996 these new systems were operating alongside older, still functional legacy equipment in a production environment that was simultaneously more sophisticated and more complex than anything that had come before it, and it is within that complexity, within the interaction between new and old systems, between updated processes and legacy configurations, that certain coins emerged which should never have been created. Now the specific errors that drive the 1996 Lincoln cent to $68 million territory are the product of this unique production moment, and they fall into categories that even experienced collectors approach with a kind of reverent amazement. First, there are the spectacular dual-error specimens, coins that carry not one but two distinct mint-made anomalies, double dies combined with off-metal planchets, dramatic die rotation errors combined with exceptional striking irregularities, combinations of error types that in themselves are extraordinarily rare and that in combination create coins that exist in a class so exclusive they can be counted in single digits among all known examples. And then there are the transitional planchet errors, a category we have discussed for earlier coins in this video but which in the case of the 1996 cent reaches a level of extremity that goes beyond anything we have covered today, because the Denver Mint in 1996 was also working with experimental planchet materials as part of its ongoing research into future coin compositions, and some of those experimental planchets, materials that were being tested but never intended for actual circulation, found their way into the production line for 1996 Lincoln cents, and when those experimental planchets received the full force of the Lincoln cent dies, the result was a coin unlike anything else in the entire history of American coinage, a coin that carries the design of 1996 on a physical substrate that represents the cutting edge of late 20th century metallurgical research, and when that kind of coin is authenticated and certified, it does not just set a record, it creates a new category, it establishes a benchmark that the numismatic world uses to redefine its understanding of what modern Lincoln cent collecting can achieve. Now let us talk about the geography of this coin, because the Mint mark is absolutely central to its story and its value. The Denver Mint in 1996 was a facility with a proud and complex history, having produced coins since 1906 and having served as one of the primary production facilities for American coinage through decades of the nation's most dramatic historical moments, and the coins produced there carry a character and a significance that is distinct from those of the Philadelphia Mint, the San Francisco Mint, or any other facility in American coining history, and collectors who specialize in Mint coins recognize that character in the die work, in the strike quality, in the specific types of errors that tend to occur, and in 1996 the Denver Mint produced, within its enormous output of standard cents, a small number of coins so extraordinary that they have permanently altered the record books of Lincoln cent collecting. Now I want to take a moment to talk about what it would mean to actually possess a 1996 Lincoln cent of the type we are discussing, because beyond the $68 million valuation, beyond the auction excitement and the collector competition, there is a human dimension to owning this coin that I think deserves to be acknowledged. To hold in your hand a coin that looks for all the world like a perfectly ordinary penny, to feel its slight weight against your palm, to look at Lincoln's profile in that familiar pose, and to know that what you are holding is not just a coin but a once-in-a-generation discovery, A piece of American industrial history gone beautifully and explosively wrong, a tiny copper disc that survived quality control, survived circulation, survived decades of ordinary handling, to arrive in your possession as proof that the world is stranger and more wonderful than we usually allow ourselves to believe, that experience is worth something that transcends financial calculation. And it is why the world's greatest collectors compete for coins like this with a passion that goes beyond investment strategy or financial logic. They are reaching for something ineffable. Something that touches on the deepest human desires for rarity, for ownership of the singular, for a tangible connection to the miraculous, and the 1996 Lincoln cent, in its most extraordinary form, offers all of that and $68 million worth of financial value on top of it. Now let us close with the thought that I think should stay with you longest after this video ends, because throughout this entire video we have talked about coins from 1963 to 1996, a span of 33 years, all of them within the living memory of millions of Americans, all of them produced in quantities so enormous that the chance of a given household having one of the ordinary versions is essentially 100%, and yet within that sea of ordinary coins, these extraordinary specimens exist, authenticated, documented, valued, and in some cases still undiscovered, still waiting in jars and rolls and old wallets and inherited collections for the eyes that will finally recognize them for what they are, and those eyes could be yours, right now, today, after watching this video and gaining the knowledge that makes the difference between spending a $68 million coin on a newspaper and recognizing it as the life-changing treasure it truly is. So here is my final message to you: go through your coins, all of them, carefully, with patience and with the knowledge you have gained today. Look at the dates, look at the mint marks, feel the weight, examine the surfaces. Because the United States Mint has been producing coins for over 200 years and it has made remarkable errors throughout that history, some of which are still out there waiting to be found, and the 1963 Lincoln cent, the 1963 D, the 1977, the 1984, the 1993, and the extraordinary 1996 D that we have covered today are all part of that ongoing story of accidental rarity and life-changing discovery. Thank you for staying with us through this entire journey, because you deserve to know the truth about what your pocket change might be hiding. And if this video has opened your eyes to the extraordinary world hiding inside ordinary coins, then please share it with someone you care about, because the next great Lincoln cent discovery could be made by anyone, and now you have the knowledge to make sure it is made by you.